Recently, I did a video with Jacob from Yorkshire Canine, and in it, I said this a lot.
Decoy, 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 decoy.
And the question I got is, what is a decoy? I'm not going to make you watch this whole video to understand it. There's going to be heaps of information, but a decoy is the guy or girl who puts on the protective equipment in order to get bitten by a dog on purpose. There's a difference between a decoy and a helper, and that difference is pretty minor, right? So those are two words that you might hear used somewhat interoperably, though there is a difference. Now, a decoy is somebody who's likely to be wearing the full body bite suit when they ultimately test the dog. That's the goal of a decoy, is to get this suit on eventually. Whereas a helper is the guy or girl who's going to be doing IGP, which is like the German sport where they just bite the sleeve. And so when you see someone just wearing the sleeve, and in competition, they're going to be wearing these crazy looking overalls called scratch pants or something like this, that is a helper. Now, the thing is, a person who is a helper is very likely also a decoy, and many people who are decoys are very likely also helpers, and we share equipment, and the development of a dog for IGP, a dog that's just going to bite the sleeve, is very similar for the first several months than to a dog that is going to go into a suit sport or real world biting. And so the skill sets that a decoy has is basically the same as what a helper has, and vice versa. Some people, like myself, I'm a decoy. I know how to develop a dog for the real world as well as for particular sports. I'm not the person you would come to develop a dog start to finish for IGP, the sleeve sport, because there's specifics involved in that you're better off seeing a specialist helper for. But that's the difference. Helper is going to be wearing a sleeve and scratch pants. Decoy is going to be in the suit. Now, with that difference understood, for the rest of this video, we're going to talk about why someone would do this, like what is the application of having a dog that could bite. We're going to talk about how you can learn to do that, where you can go and the pathway to actually becoming good at this stuff. We're going to talk about the equipment that we would use. As you can see behind me here, there's a whole rack of gear that we use when we're developing a dog, as well as we're going to talk a little bit about the toll that it would take on your body. So first up, why would anybody want a dog that bites? If you're not into this space, that could be a little bit of a tricky thing to understand. And so the first thing we've got to talk about is protection dogs. Protection dogs have always been around and will likely always be around. I don't deal in protection dogs heaps. I have in the past, but in my area, it's not really a thing that people want. It's not something that many people come to me for. Certainly, while I have a dog that bites, he's a sport dog. He's not a protection dog. He's not a dog that I want to protect me in the real world. But the reality is some people really need that. Depending on where you are in the world and the things that you do, that to many people gives them that peace of mind and this real world safety. So that's one of the reasons why you would employ a decoy to train a dog to bite. The other is back into my wheelhouse is sport dogs. So there are numerous sports. We have PSA, which is Protection Sports Association. There is Mondio Ring, there is French Ring, there's KMPV. There's numerous of the suit sports, which are civilian sports where people play out these scenarios in a controlled environment that somewhat replicate either police, military, or protection type scenarios, which is where the dog is going to demonstrate a level of control via obedience, and then we're going to have the dog bite and demonstrate control at the same time, where we're going to have complex scenarios where the dog's training, its genetics, its courage is going to be tested and demonstrated. Those sports are super important. That's probably a topic for another video, but without those sports, we wouldn't have the on-ramp and the feeding to the third reason why we'd be teaching a dog to bite, and that's for police and military type use. So of course, police and military have been using dogs for centuries to great effect, and that anybody that works in that space knows that police and military use of dogs is a massive force multiplier. It keeps people safe, it keeps the community safe, it keeps handlers safe, and the dog can do things that people just cannot do. So training protection dogs, training sport dogs and training police and military dogs is a role where you're going to need to bring in a decoy. Now, decoying is not just about that finished work. You can see, we see these videos all the time. They look incredible, these big hits and powerful attacks, and decoys putting a ton of pressure on dogs and doing all these really cool things. But the reality is, you cannot start there. When you see that kind of footage, that is usually the final endpoint, the testing. So in reality, our role as a decoy is to develop and then ultimately test. And if we're going into the real world, protection dogs and police and military type dogs, we hope that that dog never faces the real test where it has to do it for real. But in the sport world, we face the test when we take off all of our equipment and we walk onto the field. And we are in a controlled environment where we do controlled testing. Our role as a decoy is to prepare a dog to get to that test. And then in some cases, we provide the test. No matter which one of those three ultimate outcomes we're looking to have with our dog, real protection, sport, or street work as a police and military type dog, they require a development. And that understanding of how to bring a dog from a genetically appropriate dog who has the right desires, the right feelings and want to do this kind of work through to a dog that is capable of doing it is a little bit of a journey, and it's a tricky one to learn. Going to club, going to a seminar, going to an event where you can learn that is super important. And unfortunately, learning to decoy is a thing that takes a long time. I've asked my friend Ben Lipensky to speak on that because Ben has this incredible online course that I think if you're interested in becoming a decoy, you should absolutely check out today.
Like most people, my first bite, I had no clue what was going on, right? I was just kind of standing there. They put a dog on me and pretty sure I just stood there going like, wow, this is incredible. And they were probably like, okay, so he doesn't know anything. And then at Tar Heel, I started working with Sean Siggins on my decoy work. And Sean is great at teaching you how to move and how to pressure a dog and how to catch and like making you super aware of how your movements affect the dog. And a lot of that in the beginning was Sean just showing me like, okay, move like this. Oh, you see what that did, right? So we got to do it a lot hands-on, where it probably took a year before you actually become like aware in the moment of like, okay, I'm going to do this to affect that, right? At first, you're very much just, okay, I should move like this. And the dog may or may not be responding appropriately, right? And I think it takes like probably a year, right? Maybe some people a little less of like being able to actually watch the dog and then go, okay, he's doing this, so now I know I'll do this in order to change his response. But at first, you're very much just learning your movements. And that is, when I teach decoys today, like at club or at a seminar, I think the first time someone gets bit, you got to just put a capable adult dog on them that knows what it's going to do. And you got to just give them the experience, right? Because the first time, nobody is like, oh, yeah, I moved my arm this way and then he countered. Like the first time, you're just so in shock and awe of the experience that I think it's good. You just give them the experience of being bitten by a dog. And then like today, if I have someone for a long period of time, like my process is very much like teaching them to do the young dog stuff, which is kind of like sort of the opposite of like industry norms. It's like new guys work the established dogs and then eventually years in, they start working the puppies. But like I focus very heavily on teaching them to read the dog's behavior and just to promote certain things in drive and to promote certain things with the dog's biting behavior, things on and off the grip, like how they react to the dog's aggression, and start getting them to try and tune in to reacting to the dog sooner, right? To try and cut down on that time that it takes where you become aware of how you're affecting the dog. I'm trying to make new decoys aware of that early, that, like you're controlling everything that happens with this dog because as like the decoys, like sometimes you need people to just get bit by a dog for part of a scenario, right? But the real effective decoys that everyone wants to work with are the ones that can actually improve a dog and teach a dog and help the handlers accomplish their goals, whatever those are. If they're in sport or personal protection or law enforcement, it's like the decoy is that role player that is teaching the dog how to respond in bite work. Right.
Mm.
So, I'm trying to get people like, to just work a dog with a pillow and to respond appropriately, where maybe it's not as critical that they, know how to catch yet or know how to be super, super safe, but to actually start to pay attention to like, oh, now that he's barking at you, mark that and give him the reward, like treating it a little bit more like training with you new guys. And what that does for me personally with like people that want to train with me, like it tells me if they're actually interested in this for the right reasons, right? If they're interested in actually teaching these dog stuff, or if they just want to get in a suit and get some cool pictures, right? Because it's like I don't in my club, it's like I don't need that. I need people that are going to be invested in all of our training and help us teach the dogs stuff, right? So if they're just in it to like get some cool videos, I'm like, well, we'll work with you a little bit, but you're not going to be in the like inner circle here, right? You're not going to be in the club, right?
Um, it's been my experience when I've trained people that they're kind of clunky and mechanical. And then one day, and I've even observed this happen mid-session, it's like the Tetris pieces just fall into place and they suddenly get good or adequate. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like suddenly it's like robotic movements, and then all of a sudden they go, oh, like this, and they can do it.
Yeah, like that's the the guys that have been doing it a long time, it's where like the artistry comes in of like they're not thinking about the movements. You don't have to tell them the movements, right? And then they start to just respond in ways that are appropriate to what the dog needs. And then they start to find new ways to respond. And it's like everyone kind of has to follow the script for whatever it is, 6 months, a year. Some people's timeline is way different. Sometimes it's years, right? But when they hit that point where they're like, the dog does something and they respond, or they push the dog at the right moment, right? That's when they really become like the decoys that you want to work, that you want to train dogs with.
Why did you make this course? What was the driving impetus behind it?
So I decided to make an online decoy course because I do a lot of teaching decoys, a lot of in-person seminars, and every single time it's like day one is you have to go through the lecture, you have to go through the theory, like you have to teach them the terms, answer the equipment questions, answer the safety questions. You have to teach them the language, right, that you're going to be using when the dogs come out. And I think after having repeated that like day one portion so many times, I'm like, I really think like decoy work has to be learned in person, but I think I could kind of automate day one and put it out in a online format and hopefully like have everyone watch it beforehand. And that way when we show up, like, we can answer some questions, we can talk a little bit, but I can be like, cool, now we're all speaking the same language. Let's work some dogs like much sooner than previously done. And then if it, like not everyone has a decoy mentor close by, right? So, it's not ideal. It's like you kind of need a in-person mentor, but like it's not everyone's reality. So they're going to do bite work whether they have that mentor or not. So now, they can at least buy the course and have that as a reference, and the way it's set up in chapters, like if they're going to be doing some leg targeting, like they can go back and just click on the leg targeting chapter, watch that 10-15 minutes, and then be like, oh yeah, okay, that's why that session didn't go so good. And they can kind of revisit it at just the chapters that they need once they buy it, because then they can revisit those whenever. So that's kind of my goal, is that it was a resource that helps people get to the applications with dogs faster, right? And then that they can reference, over time, right? when they do encounter something with a dog and they're forgetting what their mentor or what the person said in the seminar that happened 6 months ago. They're like, I don't remember, how was I supposed to put my feet for that, right? So now they can go back and look and check it out. And that way, like, it's set up to kind of take you through, the progressions for a decoy of, all the basics of, like, teaching targeting, teaching grip work, catching a dog, reading a dog, channeling. And so then at whatever point the viewer is at in their bite work journey, they can go back and revisit the areas that they need.
Let's talk equipment. Now, depending what you're doing as a decoy, you might need a lot of gear or you might just need a little bit of gear. If you're developing dogs start to finish, and especially if you are involved in like fixing grip issues or targeting problems and many of the things that can come in the development of a dog, you're going to need a lot of gear. Now, if you can believe it, all this stuff is gear that I will regularly use at decoying and developing a dog, and it all has specific purposes. So we start out with like little puppies. We start out with just a rag. This is literally just a towel that we're going to get them gripping, and we can flip around and turn it into prey. We go up to like wedges and that sort of thing. We've got little puppy sleeves so that we're teaching them to target areas and bite and find the man within it. We've got like wedges so we can challenge grips. Ultimately, we end up with sleeves like this. This is called a chomp. That's got a sweet spot in the middle and is going to teach a dog to like give it that feedback when it bites hard. This is like a grip building device. And then as they get older, we have to teach them how to target. So we're going to start wearing like a tiny little bite suit that we wear just in the area where we want the dog to bite. And the reason we have this is so that we can maneuver ourselves without the big clunkiness of the bite suit, but also slip this and give the dog the win because he got away with it. We have the same, but in the leg version. We need to be able to teach the dog to bite the legs because in some sports we preference the legs. And if you've got a real dog, maybe you want arms, legs, whatever. As a decoy, I have to be able to teach the dog to bite one or both of those things. And then ultimately, we finish up wearing our bite suit. Even the bite suit has many different makes and models. And it's always my advice to people is to try on other people's suits. The problem with bite suits is that they're all custom made and they're super expensive. So in Australia, these end up being about $4,000 by the time you get them delivered. So this is a Demonet suit in a particular cut. This is I think they call this their tailored fit. And so it's pretty thin. It doesn't provide a lot of padding, but it provides the right padding where you need it. Whereas like I also have and really like at the moment this St. Arve suit, but again, this one doesn't exactly provide you a lot of protection on places other than where you're meant to get bitten. So this is really a specific suit for the sport that I do where 90% of the bites are going to be on this spot here, which is made so well and so nicely that you could get bitten by a crocodile here. But if you get bitten anywhere off of this, in fact, I can play a clip here of me getting bitten right here on the pleat. And it's not even a full hard bite. It's just the dog sort of mistargeted. Getting bitten there can result in a bruise like this. So to understand bite equipment, how it works and the development of it, rather than listening to me, you're better off listening to my friend Josh Kirby, who makes really incredible gear.
So it is really interesting. That layer that's on the very, very inside. The best way to explain what that layer is, the layer that actually contacts our skin. If you think of cordura, which is like backpack material, that's a very, very thin layer of a cordura type substance, something that doesn't tear very easily, but still very strong and lightweight. And what we want as decoys is we want to be able to move in there or even slip that if it gets moisture on it, or we're working a dog and we want to like give them the suit or the sleeve. So that needs to be a really strong material. The layers of padding are pretty interesting. And those layers are dependent on what exactly is being made. Do you want something that is soft and spongy, or do you want something that's a little bit firmer and more protective? So what those layers are essentially layers of felt. So felt comes in different densities. There's very, very, dense felt that's obviously going to be very protective, but the denser something is, obviously, the more restrictive it is in movement. So even in our shop, we've got, multiple layers of felt that we use in construction of sleeves, and they all have different purposes. I'm not going to keep it a secret, like what we use in our Better Belgian, because all anyone has to do is buy one and cut it open and you're going to see what it is. So it's not a trade secret or anything. I'm going to save you the trouble of destroying a sleeve. We have essentially what is memory foam inside of our sleeves, which I don't think anyone else is doing, but that's in conjunction with layers of felt. So the other part of the construction of a bite suit or a sleeve that people may or may not understand or know is the outside is called French linen. That's actually a material that's a mixture of nylon and cotton. And most bite suits and sleeves will have some type of stitch pattern that goes on the outside. It may be cross-stitched or it may just be lines like what we do. And that's the French linen. It's actually sewn onto another layer of felt. And what that does is it gives the French linen a stability to where maybe if the dog was shallow in a grip and pulled on the French linen, it doesn't like pull out away from the rest of the sleeve. That stitching really keeps everything together. So even if the dog pulls, the whole sleeve is not going to come off on that outer layer, if that makes sense. So that's kind of how the bite suits are built like that, but also sleeves are built like that. It's just different layers of material. There's a lot of people that think they can do it. And like I said, just me, in my small little shop when I was building my Belgian, it was hours and hours of research, trying things, sewing things, being frustrated with the cut, finally finding a padding that I thought was good, testing it, having a canine come through the sleeve, deciding that wasn't going to work, and then going back to the drawing boards. So I didn't have the advantage of maybe working for a company that could show me how to do all this. I had to discover it myself. But for me, it's been part of the journey, and that's been a lot of fun on the equipment side of stuff. And today I love working dogs, but I love my sewing machine. It doesn't talk back to me. I don't have problems with my sewing machine. I love days, a Sunday afternoon, cold day where I can come in the shop. No one's here. I put some music on and I don't actually fulfill orders. I'll sit here and actually create something new. Those are my favorite days. When it comes to padding versus fit, I think padding is important. And where padding is important for me is more in the development of the dog. Like I'll often use maybe a softer padding with a younger dog. But for me, fit is so much more important. I hate to say one's more important than the other, but the reason I went with different sizes is I do really value fit. And what I really don't want, especially with finished dogs, is I don't want the dog just biting material. Same as a bite suit. I want them to be able to feel the man underneath the suit or underneath the equipment. I also, I want equipment to be comfortable for decoys. There's nothing more frustrating for a decoy than to put on a sleeve or put on a bite suit and it just doesn't fit right. And the reason you're not getting the feedback from the dog or you're getting the results from the dog is really because the equipment isn't appropriate for what you're doing or the fit isn't appropriate for what you're doing. You may be doing everything right and you're not getting the result you want because of the equipment. So I think that's the responsibility of equipment makers to, produce things, listen to decoys that are out there that are in the world doing the work and try and develop things for them that is going to be beneficial for the industry, but also, a better tool for their toolbox. And I really value fit when it comes to working dogs. So that's a big reason we often offer 3 sizes in our equipment.
Can you tell me a little bit about bite suits and the different cuts of them and why someone would want to choose one cut over another?
Yeah, everything I say about bite suits is obviously going to be tailored towards Demonet bite suits. That's who we deal for. It's who we have a great relationship with. So everything I'm saying is more geared towards Demonet. But what I've really kind of seen, and this is obviously a biased opinion, is the bite suit market kind of follows what Demonet does. Even terminology, they'll look at what Demonet does. It's such a big company, and there's so many suits out there. But cut is a big thing for depending on how people are working their dogs. Police departments are still buying one suit for 4 or 5 different decoys. So fit, unfortunately, is as important as that is to me. I get it. There's budget constraints. They can only afford one suit for 4 guys, but it's not going to be the best fitting piece of equipment. But Demonet has tried their best, and what I love about the company, I think, is they really listen to me when I bring them either my ideas or ideas from people like you or Sean Edwards or other decoys that are out there, and they say, "Hey, have you ever thought about this? Or could we do this?" When I pick up the phone and I talk to Hervé and Julie, they really listen because they have a French ring background, but they understand how much is out there, not just in bite sports, but what does the police world need? What does the military need? And they've developed several different cuts where you can get a bite suit that has more of a tapered torso, or they have a bite suit that is very, very form fitting, which a lot of people like. Or they have bite suits that, have that I call it like a bat wing back, and that's more of their kimono cut. That was a very popular cut when I was a police officer, and we wanted that because we could get the dog into that lat area, work some back bites and things like that. I think training's evolved a little bit. I don't sell many of those anymore, which I'm happy about, but there are a lot of cuts that really can kind of tailor that bite suit to the type of training you're doing.
Why should someone buy through a dealer like you rather than just getting online and buying a suit directly?
That's a good question. And I think it's a very valid question because, we spend a lot of time like, hey, does price matter? Of course it matters. But for a bite suit, I think for a lot of people, that's a major purchase. I fully understand that. It's an expensive piece of equipment. And I take a lot of pride in the relationship I have with Demone has opened a lot of doors to learning about their products. So one of the reasons you might buy from me instead of maybe going to Demone International's website and buying directly is I know their product really, really well. I've been to the factory several times. I work with them as far as design. In fact, they just gave me a brand new design that I don't think anyone's seen on Sunday. And I'm testing that out for them. I got to use it over the weekend. But I have a great knowledge of the product, but I speak English. So that helps like a lot of the US customers. I'm also in your time zone. And I think, people laugh about this. Like when they meet me in person, they're like, man, I called you the other day and you actually picked the phone up. I do. Like if you call me, if I'm not working a dog or asleep, I'm probably answering the phone and I can answer your bite suit questions. I routinely get bite suit deals done within a matter of 10 minutes. You call me, we talk. Cool, got the info I need. Boom, the order's in. We do sizes and we're done. It's not a protracted process that might take weeks to do. So that's something we're proud of, and we do a lot of business for Demone, and I hope that continues.
The last thing worth understanding if you're thinking about getting into decoying, or if you work with a decoy, and you should have the respect for them about the kind of shit that they're putting their body through, is that it's really hard. Physically, it's very difficult. Now, I always say the same thing to people when they're going to get bitten for the first time. And in fact, I have a whole procedure I put people through when they're getting bitten for the very first time. And I use my own dog who knows the drill and can usually tell. He sees like somebody putting on a suit and goes, yeah, right, okay, we're teaching this guy. Is that you are going to get hurt. Our hope and our goal, and if we do everything properly, is that you will not get injured. Because the reality is, when those suits provide you enough protection to stop you being injured, to stop you being really badly damaged, but you are for sure going to get hurt. And when people decoy for the very first time, you are going to end up black and blue. There's no avoiding that. What's important is that you don't just push through that or think that those kind of bruises are really cool, because they are super dangerous, especially if you get a really significant bruising from decoying and then you do it again while that bruise is still there. That's super dangerous, can cause all kind of blood clots and ultimately a stroke. So we see it a lot. People get really proud of their bruising. And while it's cool that you endured the thing that gave you that bruise, it's not something you want. So we look to protect ourselves as well as we possibly can. And the reality is that after a few bites, after a little while of doing it, your body adapts, and as well as you get equipment that fits really well and has the padding in the right places and protects you appropriately. But even with all of that, every now and again, a dog bites you somewhere that you weren't expecting or you weren't prepared for, or in a way that you're not adequately protected and you are injured. Unfortunately, that's just part of the game. The other injuries that we see usually are like soft tissue issues or joint issues, because when you're wearing that bite suit, the bite suit weighs a minimum 15 kilos. Then you're adding a dog that probably weighs a minimum of 30 kilos as you're running around, lifting the dog, maneuvering the dog in all of that weight. So to me, what I have always found is that in my life, I've been weapon fit and I've been a great big fatso. I've been both those things. And I can tell you, being a big fatso is way more fun. But when I am not adequately strong, when I'm not adequately fit, when my core is not adequately strong, I am not as good a decoy as when it is. And so what I find myself constantly encouraging people who ask me, how do I get into decoying? I say, You got to get an education, and the best way to start that is online via something like Ben's course. You got to have the right equipment, because the right equipment will keep you protected way better than crappy equipment or equipment that doesn't fit you well. And finally, you need to be fit, because when you are fit and strong, and I don't mean like you need to be able to run a marathon, but you need to be able to hold yourself tight, and you need to be able to control your body and the body of a dog who is trying to manipulate you in that moment. When you can do that, you massively reduce the chances of injury to yourself, and you increase the quality of the work that you can do for the dog. So that's something that I always am very conscious of myself. In the periods where I need to be doing a lot of decoying, I also need to be slinging around a lot of kettlebells. To me, suit fitness is really very specific. And when we see people wanting to train for certifications, those certifications are going to be done in the bite suit. Unfortunately, the training kind of needs to be done in the bite suit as well. So what we often encourage is like sled pushes and kettlebell work in the bite suit to increase your fitness that you will ultimately use in the bite suit when you have a dog attached. So that's it. My goal was to explain to you that a decoy is a person who is on purpose wearing protective equipment and being bitten by a dog. The reason they would do that is because they're either training or testing a protection dog, a sport dog, or a real world working dog like police or military type stuff. To learn that, your best bet is to jump into some form of online training to front load as much information as you possibly can about decoying. But for sure, you are going to have to find a real world mentor. You're going to have to get your hands on lots of dogs, be critiqued, and have people give you feedback on how to do that. Get good quality equipment, get the right stuff that fits you well, and start buying that as you need it. You don't need to buy everything right away. Use other people's stuff. Find out what you like, then get the stuff that is good for you, and ultimately stay as fit and as strong, especially in the core, as you possibly can. That's what decoying is. If you made it to the end of the video, then you must be interested in what I have to say about dogs and dog training and stuff. And the reality of my job is that that's what I do. I educate, whether you're a new person to dogs and you've decided, fuck yeah, I'm going to take this really, really seriously, or you're a seasoned professional and you like the way that I'm able to explain things and you want to learn from me how to best teach others. I have an enormous online course called Everything Pat Knows, and it is everything I know about dog training. It's an enormous course. It's taken me many years to put together. And if you want to check that out, there's a link somewhere on your screen here. You can have a look at that. Or there'll be a video that YouTube thinks is cool, and I can have another go at showing you that I know what I'm talking about and convincing you to jump into that course. All right, see you next one.